for it.
Okay. Thanks, Michelle. Hi, everyone. Sunny Dillon here. I'm here to talk to you about our incentive strategy and also to cover 4 of our key incentive programs that we have in market this year. The usage incentive, the online services usage incentive, the Azure consumption incentive, and the CSP direct partner incentive and the CSP indirect reseller incentive. But I think the first thing, the North Star, if you will, the mission of the incentives team, and what we are doing, the mission of our team is to enable you to sell our strategic products and also drive usage and consumption of those products. So those are the key things that we're trying to drive with our incentives. And we're doing this through, people can't see the slides. Is that? I can't see them either, so I'm not sure which ones we're looking at right now.
Yeah, that's strange. Half the people can see them and half the people can't. I will just share them in the window as an attachment as well. So keep going, Sunny.
Okay. So what we're doing with our incentives this year, and I think it's been very, very focused. We're driving strategic products. We're driving for growth. We're getting a lot more targeted. We're going, obviously, the focus continues to be on cloud products. And we're driving our usage and consumption as well. So it's all well and good that we're selling all of these key strategic products, but we have to continue to drive usage and consumption, as that's when we know customers realize the full value of our products. Customers realize the full value of the services and the benefit of our partner ecosystem, and they will continue to engage with our products and services, continue to engage with you, and continue to sort of like buy more of Microsoft. We've actually shifted some of the incentives to drive more growth and customer acquisition. So it's been a very key thing for us. Our incentives have done really well for us. The partner ecosystem has done fabulously for us, but where we are lacking somewhat in some of the spaces is around customer acquisition and growth within the customers as well. So you'll see some key changes happening in that area. The other thing that we're going to continue to do is drive for simplicity. Now, as we get more targeted with our incentives, there is some complexity that will come about as a result of that. But what we are doing is we're making sure that when we do get targeted, it's nothing that is, the rules are as simple as possible. It won't be a straight % of revenue, but the processes, the tools and everything are going to be a lot simpler to follow. The rules will be a lot simpler to follow. And we've been making a ton of improvements on the tools and processes sides around the reporting and the analytics. And it's something that there's an intense amount of focus within Microsoft. We are going to continue to drive this focus and continue to push so that we can provide you with a level of service with incentives that is of a much higher level that we have at the moment. I want to apologize where we failed and where we haven't provided the level that we should, but there is, again, like I mentioned just now, there is an intense amount of focus to make the incentive space much better for partners so that incentives work seamlessly for you. If we can move to the next slide. And this should be the cloud incentive slide. So this is talking about how our incentives, how aggressively we're moving our incentives towards the cloud. So going from FY13, where it's around 10 to 15%, to now in FY18, where over 60% of our incentives will be targeted towards cloud services. That shows our commitment to you guys as to how much we want to push our cloud incentives and our cloud services. This is showing our incentive portfolio mix towards cloud. It's not our revenue mix. So it does show just the strategy that is being implemented by the team here. Okay, with that, let me move on to our online services usage incentive. So we announced this incentive in FY16, and we said it would continue for 3 years. And we would have the 10% rate there in market for 3 years, and we would adjust the rate card every 3 years, every year, sorry. So last year we made the decision to change the rate card. We reduced Exchange Online by 50%, and we moved that money over into Skype for Business and SharePoint Online. Now, one of the key things with this, with the evolution of this incentive is, I do want to highlight this, and it's an important point. The money that is being put into this incentive is increasing year over year. We are just, again, like I mentioned, we're being more targeted, we're being more strategic as to where we need the attention of you guys to drive more for us, more for our joint customers. So in FY18, Exchange Online will not be paid on the rate card, so it will be removed from the rate card. But what we're doing is we're taking that money and we're actually adding new services. So, for example, Azure Information Protection, AIP, which is one of the components of EMS. So currently we only pay on AADP and Intune. Going forward, from October onwards, AIP will be included as well. Obviously, a very key component. We're also adding the Dynamics suite of products as well. So AX7, CRM Online, Dynamics 365 will be included as eligible products in October as well. So there's an intense amount of focus, again, to drive usage on these. The other thing that we've done, and you may have noticed over the last year, is there has been some sort of like differences, if you will, between the online services dashboard, where you can go in and check your usage and consumption at the DPOR level, and what the data shows in there versus what it shows in your incentive statements. Now, there's a couple of reasons for that. And one of them is that there's a definition difference between what the online services dashboard showed and what we show, what we pay for in incentives. Going forward in FY18, that definition will be aligned with what is on the online services dashboard and what we will pay for. So, for example, mobile application management, MAM, for Intune was not an eligible intentional action, if you will, for Intune. It will be going forward. There are other things in AADP especially. There's a ton of new customer usage scenarios that are being enabled. And what this means is the opportunity to drive services and to drive more usage at these customers is going to increase fairly significantly. As a result of some of these usage scenarios being deployed, and we will share all the definitions with you guys as soon as we have this, as soon as we have the final versions locked. But we're seeing the numbers for usage increase very, very significantly and double in certain scenarios. And what this also means is, at the same time, that we will be looking at the rate card values for AADP and Intune as we look at the overall piece of adding AIP and the Dynamics suite of products. The other thing I wanted to talk about when we think about the differences between the online services dashboard and the incentive statements is, for incentives, for example, last year we were paying on MPSA, EA, and CASA ES. Going forward, we will only be paying on EA and CASA EES. And this is a strategic direction. We're going to focus on our two main licensing vehicles as the EA and CSP. CSP is more of a usage consumption model, so it's not going to get added into the usage or consumption incentives, but we're removing MPSA. But MPSA usage data will still be available on the dashboard. And there are certain SKUs that are also not, that we don't actually pay for within the usage incentive that you can also see on your online services dashboard. So I just wanted to highlight that as a more of a tactical thing, that there are differences between the two dashboards. But if you want to ever look at what you're actually getting paid for, the incentive statements are the one source of truth, if you will. The other things I wanted to highlight in here, the rate card will be published towards the end of August. We're trying to move quickly and publish sooner, but given some of the changes that we've undergone as well, so we're making sure that we have all the right data and the alignment before we publish all of that information. But you will have that. It will include AIP and the Dynamics suite of products as well. The max cap will stay at 100,000, and that's at service level. So, for example, Office 365 is a service. So if a customer has Office 365 and AADP, that would count as 200,000, 100,000 for Office 365 and 100,000 for AADP. Now, if the customer has two Office 365 subscriptions, the cap is 100,000. So it's 100,000 per service, per customer, per partner. I'm going to pause there and see if there's any questions before I move on to the Azure incentive, consumption incentive. I'm hoping everyone can hear me clearly. I was
Yes, we
presenting
can.
again. There was some connection issues.
We absolutely can.
Perfect. Excellent. Okay. All right. So if there's no questions, I will move on to Azure consumption.
Sunny, there is a question regarding the online services around CSP.
So CSP, any licenses sold through CSP are not eligible for the usage or the Azure consumption incentive. CSP license sales and solution sales are eligible through the CSP incentive itself. And the reason for that is these incentives are primarily focused around EA and campus and school agreements, and we don't want it's because there's a closed ecosystem of partners that can sell the EA, but there's partners that are driving usage and consumption, and we feel in the CSP space that partner is one and the same. The partner that is driving the sale is also the partner that is deploying, also the partner that is driving the consumption, because you own that customer relationship end to end, whereas in the EA can be a different partner. So that's why CSP is not included. But we will be covering the CSP incentives shortly after the Azure consumption incentives. So bear with me. So let me talk about the Azure consumption incentives and what are the key changes happening there. So again, as I mentioned earlier, we've been paying 15% for all consumption, and the year before that it was 20%, and we were paying both cloud and silver, gold and silver cloud platform partners. Now, we have to get more targeted, and one of the things that we want to do is drive customer acquisition and drive growth within the customers. It's one of the tenets, one of the key metrics that we are looking at. So, and we want to differentiate between our top partners that are driving a significant amount of consumption and other partners. So from October 1 onwards, and again, sorry, I should mention MPSA is again excluded from this incentive for reasons that I spoke about previously. So from October 1, the 15% incentive for gold and silver partners will move to 7% for gold cloud platform partners only. Now, this 7% will pay them for all their consumption where they're DPOR. So all of the ongoing consumption that we've been paying for the past few years, 4 or 5 years now, will continue to get paid at 7% for gold cloud platform partners only. Now, this incentive, this 7% is capped at $100,000 at the subscription level. There are two other levers that we're introducing. There's the quarter-over-quarter growth and the customer adds levers. Both of these levers are eligible for both gold and silver cloud platform partners. Now, here's how the quarter-over-quarter incentive will work. This is going to be paid at the partner portfolio level. So we won't be looking at each individual customer subscription. We will look at all the customers where you're the partner of record, and we will measure the growth quarter over quarter. So for example, if in Q1 you have 10 customers and they did $100 in consumption, in Q2 those very same 10 customers do $170. That $70 growth will be paid 20%. Now, the good thing about this incentive is that it's not capped. So the more growth you drive, the more you earn. So there's absolutely no cap. But if there are customers that are decreasing in consumption, that will offset some of the growth numbers as well. Customer acquisition will also be taken into account in the scenarios as well. And we've built out slide decks that we'll share with you that show all the scenarios. So for example, if you were DPOR for a customer in Q2, but you weren't DPOR for that customer in Q1, whatever that consumption was for that customer in Q1 will be added to the baseline. And again, to be fair, if you drop a customer in Q2 because of DPOR, we will remove that customer's consumption from the baseline numbers in Q1 as well. So it's always the same number of customers that we're looking at quarter over quarter. The other lever that we're adding is, and we've had a global campaign running, and we're also looking at a global campaign running on EA around customer ads, and we're looking at something to continue next year as well. But this lever, what it does is, if you drive $5,000 worth of consumption in a quarter, and that quarter has to align to Microsoft's fiscal quarter, we will pay you a flat $4,000. So for the first $5,000, you get $4,000 of incentive. And it's a one-time incentive, and it's paid at the customer level. So once a customer has consumed 5,000, it won't be subscription we won't be looking at this at a subscription by subscription level. Now, the way this gets really interesting is, if you add a customer, you get, and they do $5,000 in a quarter, you get $4,000 for that customer. That same $5,000 will also be included within the quarter over quarter. So you're going to get paid 20% on that $5,000 as well. And if you're a gold cloud platform partner, you will get 7% as well. So it's all additive. So as long as you're driving that behavior around acquisition of customers and then growing those customers, the incentive becomes incredibly rich. It's just more targeted. There's questions on there. The new customer ad applies to EA Direct and Kazaa. We are working on something for CSP, and we hope to launch a campaign around CSP as well. And quarter over quarter growth, yes, it is for EA Direct and Campus and School as well, not for CSP. And the quarter-over-quarter does kick in on the 1st of October. The first calculation will be for October through December, and we'll compare that quarter to July through September quarter.
Sunny, can I just clarify on the customer ads? When you say that it's at the customer level, do you mean the top parent level? So if we have for example, a government, a state government that has a lot of agencies sitting under it, is it at the top parent level that's applied?
It will be at the top parent level.
Okay,
so
thank you.
We did look at that, and I think that's a really good question. We did look at that, and it becomes incredibly tricky for us to pay out such a rich incentive. The calculation also becomes incredibly tricky because what we're trying to do is introduce and seed those customers. And then in terms of driving further adoption, the quarter-over-quarter will obviously apply, and the 7% if you're gold will also apply. But the actual customer acquisition piece will be at the top parent level.
And sorry, just one more question on that. So if a customer in the first quarter is at $100, and then in the second quarter they get to $5,000, then in that second quarter the reseller gets paid, the POR or the CSP reseller gets paid the $4,000. Is that right?
That is correct. So let me clarify something around CSP. CSP is not included in the Azure consumption incentive. We will be launching something separately for CSP for both the direct partners and indirect resellers. The mechanics are going to be the same, but we're just working through that. It won't be through the global programs. It will be a campaign that we launch. So this is an early preview. We're working through that piece, but I know that we've got on there, and Michelle has correctly answered that will happen, but it's not part of this incentive. It will be a separate campaign that we will announce very shortly. For indirect providers, the campaign is specifically for CSP direct partners and CSP indirect resellers, and that will be announced very shortly, yes. What the slide that you're looking at is for EA agreements, when your GPOR on EA, WebDirect, and campus and school agreements. It is only for those licensing models, and CSP will happen separately. Indirect CSP providers, we can cover that off separately because that is those rates are, because that's more of an authorized channel. We looked at that. We can have a one-on-one conversation around that. Okay, any questions around Azure consumption? And again, I apologize if there's any confusion around this, but let me just clarify. The levers that you see on there, the 7%, the 27% for gold on all consumption, the 20% quarter-over-quarter, and the $4,000 incentive for driving $5,000 worth of consumption that aligns to Microsoft's fiscal quarter, these are all for EA, WebDirect, and Casa EES. The customer ads scenario for CSP will be launched shortly, and Michelle will provide you with all the information around that. But we're just working through the final T's and C's on that. Any questions, guys, on this piece, on Azure or usage? Okay, let me move on to CSP. CSP. So the next two slides are CSP direct partner and CSP indirect reseller. So CSP direct partner is the partners buying directly from Microsoft and selling to customers, and the indirect resellers are buying from an indirect provider and then selling on to the customer. Now, both of these incentives are exactly the same. The key, there's a few changes that are happening, and I really do feel very good about these changes, that we're taking steps in the right direction. The first thing that's happening is we're moving away, eligibility is moving away from MPL, which is Microsoft's managed partner list, to competency-based. Now, this puts the eligibility of incentives in your own hands, and I think that's a very important thing. The visibility is there. You know what you have to do to earn these incentives. It's not something that Microsoft will kind of mandate, if you will, like you have to be managed. Now, there are 8 competencies that you can attain, one of 8. So you can, it could be cloud, it's the 8 cloud competencies. So as small as the small mid-market cloud solutions competency, cloud productivity, cloud platform, and you can be gold or silver in any one of those competencies, and you will be eligible for the CSP direct partner and the CSP indirect reseller incentives. The other changes that are happening with the incentives is, well, the great thing that is happening is we're keeping the rates the same. So the rates are stable, they're at 8%. But what we're doing is we're adding 2 global accelerators. And Michelle can update you guys on what's happening with the local accelerators, but there are 2 global accelerators. And as you can see, there's a 5% accelerator on SPE E3 and SPE E5, which is now Microsoft 365 Enterprise E5, Microsoft 365 Enterprise E3. And you would have heard at Inspire that we also we announced Microsoft 365 Business. Now that service will also get included in this 5% global accelerator upon launch. So the 5% global accelerator will be for all 3 of those SKUs. And that's on top of the 8%. So when you sell Microsoft 365 Business, you will get 13% on top of the margin or the discount, whichever word you want to use from that in terms of the pricing. The other thing that we've added is a 20% accelerator for the standalone PSTN calling and conferencing SKUs. Now, again, this is a very, very key service that we want to drive, and part of what we're trying to do is ensure that there is a good, viable earning opportunity for you partners. For these SKUs, on the price list, net and ERP is the same, so there's no actual margin or discount available. So as an incentives team, we feel, and we've aligned with the BGs, and the BGs are very excited about this, that we're adding this 20% so that there is a significant amount of profitability, a significant amount of incentive there for you to sell these standalone calling and conferencing SKUs. And I know not all of the SKUs are available, and I'm not sure if there's been any announcements made as yet, but the SKUs that are available will get the 20%. And again, this is incremental. So the 8% plus the 20, so 28%. And Michelle has added that there's a 4% accelerator on Azure that starts on July 1. And I should have pointed out the CSP incentives are currently in market. They launched on July 1. So all of the sales that you're making are getting paid these new incentive rates. They're accruing at those new incentive rates. The payment, as you know, the first payment will be made in the January timeframe. I'll stop there and ask if there's any questions.
Yeah, there's two additional questions at the bottom of the Skype window, Sunny.
Wait, I don't see anything. What's going on here?
That's right. I'll read them out to you. So, first question is that standalone means the incentive is applicable for Skype for Business PSTN, conferencing, calling add-ons for Office 365 Business and Enterprise, but won't be applicable for Office 365. I assume they're saying that it won't be for the other SKUs in Office 365, correct?
That is correct. It's
Yeah.
only for the standalone SKUs, yes.
And I'm just reaffirming that we don't have dates yet for PSTN conferencing and calling as yet, so that won't be applicable to Australia yet. In terms of Office 365, E3, E5, and Business Premium, the core incentive applies to that, not the additional Global Strategic Product Accelerator. And will there be a new Azure customer rebate for CSP?
So the global incentives that we have in market apply to all CSP revenue. So the only exclusion that we have in CSP is exchange light. That is the only revenue that is excluded. So what you're looking at, the 8% incentive applies to all other CSP revenue. So Azure is included. And this is again, incentive separating out from the margin and the discount that you get when you buy from Microsoft or from the indirect provider. So this is just on that build revenue. So Azure is included. Now, I did talk about the Azure Customer Ads campaign, and that is something that we're working on for CSP. We're in the final stages, and we should have something to announce fairly shortly. And the idea is the same. We want to drive customer acquisition. It will be aligned to Microsoft's fiscal quarters. So if you drive $5,000 worth of consumption at a customer that hasn't consumed Azure before at a predefined level, then you will get a one-time payment of $4,000. Now, we're working through it. We hope to get approval around this. It isn't final, but that is the current plan of record. So once it is approved, we will announce it, but that is something that we're working through.
So the next question is, how do partners see how much they're making? Where do they see their statements?
So there is the incentive tool is called PI Experience, and you have to be, once you start to sell CSP, you automatically get an invite to onboard and provide all the relevant information. And once you have done that, you can see all your earnings through that tool. And again, if you're having any issues, please feel free to reach out to the local team. They can actually ensure that the operations team should be handling all of this, the partner incentives operations team. But if you're having problems with this, please do reach out to the team.
Yep, Banu is the best person to help you answer all those questions. All right, shall we move on to indirect, Sunny?
Yeah. So as I had mentioned earlier, so these are partners that are buying from indirect providers and then selling on to end customers. And again, the incentives mirror what is happening in direct partners. The eligibility requirements are also the same. So it's one of the 8 competencies at gold or silver level. The incentive the global incentive is 8% and is paid on all your billed revenue apart from Exchange Lite. and we've added the global accelerators around Microsoft Enterprise E5 and E3 and Microsoft 365 Enterprise E3, E5 and Microsoft 365 Business when it is launched. So those are the three services that will be included in the 5% incentive. And again, it's additive. So for selling those strategic SKUs, you will actually make 13% incentive on top of any margin that you have with your that you negotiate with your indirect provider. The PSTN calling and conferencing I won't talk about as it's not eligible. Michelle, thank you for pointing that out, and I apologize for going on about that one, guys. Again, I think the overall point around this is that there's with the significant growth in CSP revenue, we are putting a lot of money into this channel to drive this, because again, everyone at Microsoft always talks about this. We are Satya's, to quote Satya, we always have been, always will be a partner-led company. And I think this is another instance of how it proves that how important you guys are, because our total true partner, where we're kind of saying, here, have the keys to the customer management, customer life cycle, we are investing more and more in that channel, despite the massive revenue growth that we're also seeing in that. The level of investment here is very, very significant. And again, like, to be perfectly honest, this is not a level that we see continuing well into the future. So CSP, it is a great time to be selling CSP, and it's a great time to be taking advantage of these incentives. So I would strongly encourage you to sell as much as you can, as quickly as you can. These incentives are in market for the year. The rates are guaranteed for the year, but these are incredibly rich. And so it becomes an exercise again every year to balance the priorities and balance the overall rates. Just keep doing what you're doing and really drive this home.
Sunny, sorry, there's a quick question for you. In terms of for indirect resellers, how is that build revenue calculated? Is that based on RRP, or how do you calculate that?
It is. So I would need to verify that with our operations team, but I can. Let me get back to you on that, the exact piece of that.
Cool. Thanks.
Are there other questions, guys?
And so also Leon Wright did just make a very good point that conferencing is already available, just not calling. So you can still make 20% on conferencing.
Excellent, excellent.
Awesome. All right. With that, if you do have any more questions, feel free to email Banu or myself. I will be sending the recording out post the call with the slides and details on our local accelerators for CSP. Thank you so much to everyone for joining. Really appreciate your time, and thank you very much, Sunny, for coming to present to us.
No, thank you for the opportunity, Michelle. It's always good to get input and feedback. And guys, it's incredibly important as you go through the year, as you're going out selling cloud services, that you continue to provide feedback on the incentives, on anything else. And I think, sorry, I just did want to make one last point around this, that one of the great things that has happened over this year, and it was announced at Inspire, was that our field will only get paid on consumed revenue, and that's going to be a huge factor in actually eliminating some of the tension between EA and CSP, because CSP is all consumed revenue, and our field will now be focused on consumed revenue as well. And so that need and desire to get that billed revenue goes away. And so that's going to create significant opportunities for everyone here and reduce some of that friction. So it's again, just a great time to be selling this.
All right. Thanks again. Talk to you soon, guys.